You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. LSU, less than 2 weeks away from the start of spring practice, and we finally learned that John Jancic is being promoted from his off-field role to an on-field role, replacing Brian Polian. He'll be the outside linebackers coach, but he will also double as the special teams coordinator. Sounds like they're going to divvy up roles, however, and manage the special teams that way. And LSU did this a few years back in 2017 when Greg McMahon was hired as an analyst, and Ed Orgeron did not replace Bradley Dale Pivito with a full-time special teams coordinator. They kind of divvied it up a little bit, and 2017 didn't go great in the special teams department. They promoted Greg McMahon, and he was awesome the rest of his time in Baton Rouge. So our buddy Zacj Von Rosenburg, of course, was on that team. So I wanted to talk about what it was like not having a full-time special teams coordinator and how this might all improve for LSU. So Zach's good enough to join us now. How are you, dude?
I'm doing good. How are you, man?
Man, I'm doing awesome. Thanks for the time. Always good to hear from you. Let me just start with going back to 2017. Just functionally, when you don't have a one person designated to be the special teams coordinator, what kind of challenges does that present?
It does hurt how do I say, the organization of individual special teams units' ability to manage, I guess, the specific team. But if every coach that's taking on the role of for example, let me explain how 2017 worked. A coach manned every unit, if you will. So we had Geronimo, which was like our rush on our field goal unit, and then we had field goal, then we had punt, kickoff, return, all that. But each coach was designated a specific unit. And the challenge of it is when you have a guy overseeing everything, it's a little bit, I guess, easier for one guy to divvy up the responsibilities and say, hey, we're doing this today, X, Y, Z tomorrow. And that's kind of how it worked under Coach McMahon. And under Coach McMahon, we kind of had to consolidate because it became too much for each coach to do. If he's a special teams coach, or excuse me, if he's a linebackers coach, trying to manage a pass rush unit for kick field goals or whatever, it's just too much to take on, in my opinion. But now I think with Brian Polian taking, a step back, I think he's still going to be involved with special teams. I just think it's going to be less of a, he's going to, divvy up the roles for each unit and kind of break it up. I'm not a huge fan of it, but at the same time, Brian Kelly may be able to manage it better than we did, say, in 2017.
So McMahon was on that staff in 2017. He was just an analyst, right? So the analysts can't coach on the field, but the word is like they can coach the coaches.
Right.
Did you feel Greg McMahon's impact more in 18 and 19 when he was the special teams coordinator as opposed to 17? Like what really, because honestly, Zach, that's what, like Bob Diaco, who's coming on, that's sort of what his role is going to be. Kind of what McMahon did in 17 is sort of like a special teams guy, but in an analyst role. So how does that work?
So the hindrance for Coach McMahon in 2017, we still obviously benefited from him being there, of course. But the biggest hindrance is him not being able to speak at our meetings. We'll be in a special teams meeting, and you're basically playing telephone with your special teams coach, right? So Coach McMahon would tell whatever, GA or whoever's going to do the meeting or run the meeting verbally what he wants to convey to the players, and you're basically playing telephone. Coach McMahon instructs you how to do such thing, X, Y, Z, whatever special teams units were running through that day. And he tells you, hey, I want this done, this covered, this covered, this covered, and this is how we need to do it. And it's just a more difficult way of doing things because you're playing telephone a little bit through your coaching staff. And that works whenever everybody's on the same page, but you can see how that at times can become a little bit of a hindrance when, things get lost in translation. Maybe you're not teaching the right technique. Maybe you're not teaching the right leverage. Maybe you're not covering the right gaps. It can become a problem. And I'm not going to say, we can't accomplish that feat this season. I'm just saying it is a more difficult task than just having Greg McMahon stand in front of the room and convey what he needs to the players.
That makes sense. I mean, there's a very practical application of that. That makes sense, Zach. So in what you obviously watch the team. I mean, we talk all the time, about this all the time, but you watched them in 2022. What, from your vantage point, went so wrong for LSU in that third phase of the game last year?
I think it was just how do I say this, high turnover in our special teams room, and then on top of that, I'm sure they had a lot of ground to cover. You're turning over a guy who had a 5-year term at LSU and kind of was preaching the same system, the same everything for 5 straight years. Well, when you flip around and have a new guy teaching maybe different things with different language, it's just a hassle. And maybe Brian Polian got, obviously we are all disappointed a little bit in how things went, but that turnover a little bit is because he was the new guy in the first year. And it's always going to be a thing where when you're coaching your terminology and your technique, year 2 is where you're going to see, okay, it's dramatically improved. You've got 2 years of players learning the system and learning their, communication or whatever it may be in year 2. And obviously we had some things happen, like, I hate to say this, but the fumble, blocked field goal return for a touchdown. Some of those things were mental mistakes that I know were covered. It's just we were on the wrong end of a learning lesson, for the rest of the Brian Kelly term, because those things will never happen again. I guarantee you that. It's just, it's kind of a bad year and a snowball effect of a lot of things that, we may have covered under McMahon, and we needed to recover under Brian Polian because of the amount of turnover we have with players. And it's just unfortunate, again, because I know Brian Polian is a great coach and a great recruiter. It was an unfortunate time of turnover with players in the room, and things kind of snowballed, I'm sure, and it caused a lot of errors, mental errors on the field. But I don't think that will happen, obviously, this year.
Well, do you think, though, that so you had turnover, which, I mean, of course, we saw that, going with all the transfer portal guys, just everything. And I think they turned over like 75% of the roster last year, so that makes sense. But could I argue that in now moving on from Brian Polian, you're creating even more turnover? Right now, it's a third new voice in the 3rd consecutive year.
Yes, and that is true. But I would say, and my argument now would be, well, we've made quite a few mistakes on special teams in 2022, and I don't see all those things that we may have lacked emphasis because we were trying to implement a new defense and a new offense last year, and it kind of has special teams on the afterburner. Now it's going to be, okay, special teams is going to be our strength this season. I seriously doubt Brian Kelly would have a special teams deficiency after already having in his first year a special teams deficiency.
Zacj Von Rosenburg is our guest, of course, former LSU punter, guy won a national championship on that 2019 team. The one thing, Zach, that when I look at LSU special teams for 2023 that I'm really optimistic about is the specialists actually were really good. Like, I don't know that they had an errant snap all year. I think Damian Ramos really steadied and became a pretty good kicker. Jay Bramblett was a very solid punter. He's also the holder. So when you look at that part of it, Zach, I mean, returning all of the specialists, that has to buoy the team in 2023. Like, I'll ask it sort of in a very obvious way, but how big of a deal is that whenever you return all those guys, even though it was from a unit that maybe as a whole didn't perform great?
Right. I would say it's a lot like our 2020, going into our 2020 season after winning the national championship in 2019. Everybody returned to 2020 outside of Blake Ferguson. I mean, we had Cade, we had me, and we had a new snapper, but he was already, he had 2 years under his belt before he started snapping. And but this year, obviously, from the kicking standpoint, we're looking strong. Jay Bramlett, I think, is this his 6th year? Pretty sure he's going to be, he was a stud last year, so I'm sure he'll just repeat. That'll be a pretty obvious, repeat performance for him. And then Ramos, he looked great at the end of the season. He made all his kicks, and even the kicks that got blocked, most of them that I remember were not his fault. And if you got guys that you can rely on and are defendable like that, all you really have to lock down now is that blocking unit on field goal, and then obviously the coverage unit on punt. And I don't see a whole lot of worry on the end of Jay Bramlett and Ramos. You just kind of got to worry about filling those gaps and making sure we're closing down and clamping down on kickoff and not giving up big plays. That's the key for special teams. Is anytime you're giving up possession, those are the obvious situations where inferior teams can kind of get one over on you with a big special teams play and change the momentum of the game. But when you have Ramos and Bramblett coming back, I think they're going to be strong, and I could see them being a top 10, special teams unit this year, where last year I believe we were obviously the bottom, 20. I'm not sure exactly on rankings, but I could see them completely, springboarding back to the top 20 at the very least in special teams units in the country.
Yeah, the ESPN stats and info there, their power index rating had LSU as a whole, special teams 130 out of 131 as far as efficiency. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, Zach, I don't need to be top 20. Can I get to the top half of the country? I mean, that in and of itself would be a dramatic improvement year to year. Last thing, look, you kind of saw the gamut at LSU, right? I mean, you saw a coaching change, you saw units that weren't so great, and you saw literally the greatest team ever that you were on. So just give me your impression of LSU coming off of 2022 going into 2023.
I mean, the expectations are high. You have a returning quarterback, which is huge. I mean, anytime you return a quarterback, it's kind of a similar situation, if not the exact same situation as a Joe Burrow. Joe had a great 2018 and springboarded and had probably the greatest season ever in 2019. And, Jaden is coming off a great year. He had an excellent year in Baton Rouge. And, I mean, I say the sky is the limit. I don't know what to predict, and I hate making predictions now after thinking, I've been high on LSU the last few years just because I felt like we always have the talent to beat anybody. And we proved that last year beating Alabama at home. But this year is almost no excuse. We've solidified, every phase of the game. We have the linemen, we have the running backs, we have the skill players, and we have a quarterback. And it's I want to say we're going to have a great year. It's just we got to go out and do it. You have to prove it day in, day out. You got to stay healthy. There's a little bit of luck in there with the staying healthy in the trenches because, as we all know, Georgia and Alabama have been dominant in the trenches, and that's how they win games. And we have too in the past. That's just something we got to get back to doing. That's what we did in 2019. We won I believe we had the offensive line of the year in 2019, and that's how you win ball games. You beat Alabama when you dominate the offensive line, and that's how we have to do it. And I think we have the players and the talent around Jaden Daniels to do that.
Hey man, before you go, tell people what you're doing now. Football's done. So what's going on?
Yeah, so I provide staffing for emergency work, industrial staffing, concrete labor. I do a lot of travel now, oil and gas too in West Texas. But basically, I'm the middleman that provides labor to a lot of businesses here in Baton Rouge, Lake Charles, and in Texas. And even for the hurricane last year, I went to Florida. But yeah, it's not what I expected to be doing, but I do. For that Florida hurricane, I provided a bunch of A linemen and had guys saying, hey, thanks for this job. It's the best paying job I've ever had in my life because it was hurricane pay. And I was like, man, this is kind of awesome. And when you got people saying stuff like that, you feel pretty good about it,
It's awesome. Zacj Von Rosenburg, you'll follow him on Twitter at ZVR09, at ZVR09. Thanks, man. We appreciate the time as always. We'll be in touch.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.